Hey, yo, what is going on, guys? Got a brand new episode of Buy or Bust for you guys today. Today, we're going to be talking about the Colonel America, which is the brand new Series 5 card releasing on Tuesday, the Zombie Season. This is the card that comes out, of course, with the Season Pass cards, as well as the brand new Series 4 cards. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. So in case you guys did not know, Colonel America is the Series 5 card that I was talking about that is releasing on Tuesday. And this card is pretty interesting. It is an ongoing ability where your other cards here have +1 power for each turn you have discarded a card. This is what it looks like in game, but this is one of those cards where you can't get it to proc multiple times on the same turn, but it is ongoing, so it looks at concurrently how many cards you've discarded total and through the course of the entire game in order to be able to get the other cards in your lane extra power. It doesn't have to be just ongoing cards like regular Captain America, and it doesn't have the shield on the board like Sam Wilson. It is another kind of iteration of Captain America, but it is Colonel America, so it should not work with the shield, so just keep that in mind as well. But this card has some very interesting potential. Talking about that interesting potential, we're going to talk about some of those key synergies, which, of course, I'm thinking of Blade, I'm thinking of like a Lady Sif, potentially like a Corvus, or like a Colleen. Some of these discard cards that just discard stuff but don't get any extra benefit themselves too. Having them in the same lane as Colonel America makes it so whenever you discard a card, of course, they get that extra +1 ongoing power for each turn you've discarded a card, which can help these cards be better than just like that normal just flat 1/3 kind of value is kind of my thought process there. When we're talking about Blade. Next, of course, I'm talking about Khonshu. Khonshu is one of those cards you want to be able to discard multiple times. So using that with Colonel America to give you some options to be able to get extra value out of Khonshu. Thinking more of like the Gore/Iron Man style list is my thought process when we're talking about Khonshu here. Being able to set Colonel America up in a lane to be able to, when you revive that card, potentially get Khonshu value. Or, like I said, set it up with those discard enablers you have already that are just those on reveals that happen that don't have the added benefits that some of these other discard cards get. And then lastly, we're going to talk about Zombie Power Man, which is, the brand new Series 4 card, one of them releasing on Tuesday as well as, Zombie Giant Man. We're not going over those in any Buy or Bust videos, but Zombie Power Man has the text that if you are winning this location, discard the leftmost card in your hand. So you could use this potentially with Colonel America just to continue to discard cards every turn, have that as an option in order to get value for both of those cards. Next, talking about some of those key counters for this card. Red Guardian, of course. If this is a lane by itself, it's more likely to be able to be Red Guardian. Of course, it does have that 3 power, so it does not necessarily mean that it's going to be guaranteed hit on Red Guardian every time, because 3 power is kind of in that kind of middle area of that. But like for Red Guardian targets, especially not having Prio, Red Guardian can just kind of hit your Colonel America, and that's kind of what feels bad. Next, of course, we have Enchantress. This is an ongoing card. Enchantress removes ongoing abilities. And then we have Lady Deathstrike. Lady Deathstrike, of course, is a 3/3, and since its power goes to the cards next to it, it does not go to Colonel America himself. Lady Deathstrike should be able to hit this pretty much every time. Of course, Cosmic Ghost Riders, another one of those tech cards that can kind of just mess around with Colonel America as well. Now let's talk about the good for Colonel America. The good is it's a potential another discard scaler. Of course, not scaling itself, but scaling lanes if you're able to discard multiple discard cards or just discard multiple cards, which it is, it only counts 1 per turn, but it is a way to kind of gain extra power in those lanes as well. It's ongoing, so, there are slightly less counters than some of these other kind of cards we have coming out, and it's an okay late draw because it's also ongoing, since it looks at concurrently how many cards you've discarded. And it's a 3 cost, so it's not the worst tempo. Your turn 3, more often than not, is probably going to be more like a Corvus or potentially a Lady Sif. This gives you a nice alternative if you do not have that line, or if you want to run maybe a different kind of style of discard. And then it goes to the power to all cards at the location, whether they're ongoing, whether they're regular, whether they're on reveal. This power goes to any of them. You just have to discard cards, opposed to like other Captain America, making it so only ongoing cards get that extra benefit of power. So I think that's kind of something that's pretty cool about Colonel America. But moving on to the bad for this card. Of course, it's kind of niche. It's limited to discard. You have to be able to discard cards in order to get value on this, and you can discard multiple cards on the same turn, of course, but it only counts if you've discarded on that turn, meaning like you could discard 2 cards on the same turn, but you're only going to get +1 power on Colonel America since it is once per turn, opposed to the amount of cards you've discarded in general. That would, I think, would be even crazier. And then the base power is a 3/3. Like I'm saying, it's not the highest base power. It's kind of towards that middle zone, but not towards like the newer standard I think we have for 3-cost cards. And my other question is, like, does it necessarily fit in the standard discard shells, or are you making something completely different? Are you trying to add success or make some of these decks better, or are you hindering them putting Colonel America in? I think that's something we need to kind of like just test and kind of see before we put that official label on it. But it's because something I kind of was just thinking about when I was like making the video. Next, as we talk about the floor and the ceiling for this card, on the low end, the floor, if you don't discard any cards at all, this is just a 3/3, okay? If you discard 1 to 2 cards, okay, you have your 3/3 base power on Colonel America, and then you add 1 power to all the other cards in that lane. And I'm assuming like we have filled a lane here for Colonel America. Adding a 1 power to all those other cards make this essentially like a 3/6 because you're adding +1 to the other 3 cards in that lane. If you discard 2 cards, essentially this makes this a 3/9 because you're adding 2 power to all the other cards in that lane as well. That's the middle end. Probably you're discarding at least 1 to 2 cards, I'd say, a game, probably on separate turns to be able to get that value. Now, on the absolute top end over here, this is me also assuming that Colonel America can work with Dracula. When Dracula discards a card at the end of the game, that is a different, that's another turn that happened. That was a turn 6 kind of play that made Colonel America potentially proc, kind of like how Morbius procs after a card is discarded. So that could give you that 5 additional power onto cards, or if you're just discarding cards literally on every single turn, also can kind of happen that way too, because you're not really discarding on 3, you're discarding maybe on 1 you hit Blade, 2 you hit Colleen, you play Colonel America on 3, on 4 let's say you play Lady Sif, 5 you play MODOK, and 6 maybe you Grandmaster or the Dracula goes off. It's kind of like my thought process there, or you Grandmaster maybe on 5 and then you MODOK on 6. Like, I feel like that's kind of like a way you could get to the 5, which would make this essentially a 3/3 plus 15 because you're adding 5 power to the other 3 cards in that lane. 3/18's pretty good. I would say that's a pretty solid shout. If you discard 3 cards, he's a 3/3 plus 9, 3/12, pretty good. I don't know. I feel like there's some like options. Of course, it's gonna be like kind of niche scenarios there, but that's like the ceiling for this card. This has the power to be potentially a 3/15 if you hit the perfect curve and you have like the perfect hand and stuff. It's not impossible. But let's talk about some of these decks that I have for Colonel America as well. And this is what I was thinking about. Is this actually viable in a classic discard shell? I don't know. Of course, you do have Khonshu and Scorn, and you have Corvus also in this, so it's maybe not the OG classic kind of shell, but you have Morbius, you have Malekith. I like Malekith in this, honestly, too, to be able to give you some deck thinning, and also to enable you to have some extra potential Colonel America power. In the sense your opponent doesn't know Colonel America is about to pop off at the end of this game and give you bonus power in this lane. So you're using that kind of as like a sneaky piece in this list. And then you have Khonshu, Revive cards, you have Apocalypse to scale to be able to get some Dracula value. You have a bunch of different ins and out. Of course, your Dracula, your Morbius are kind of your main scalers, but Colonel America I'm using as like another bonus piece of power. In order to be able to kind of maybe contest other lanes, you of course have Khonshu or Revive cards that also can give you bonus power as well. Gambit to destroy cards on your opponent's side of the board, as well as getting that discard down. Like, I feel like there's just a variety of options in using Gambit into Khonshu to be able to get those cards back. Like, I feel like this maybe could be a kind of shell, or at least a starting point for Colonel America. Next, of course, we have Colonel's Moon Haunts You, which is heavily inspired by Rorum's Moon Haunts You. Just slightly different, using a Silver Samurai, of course, and using Colonel America. We're not running Quinjet or Infinity Ultron, but we're still running the Luna Snow route. Kind of just maybe you're discarding kind of like first Ghost Rider discards, Blade discards, Lady Sif discards, Silver Samurai discards. That's 4 discards there, potentially, with like perfect curve. Perfect curve. And then you also have options to Grandmaster cards to give you more options to be able to discard, is kind of the thought process there. But this is more into just like a heavy Khonshu line. You, of course, have Ghost Rider bring back cards if you don't get the Khonshu. You can also Grandmaster your Ghost Rider in order to get more cards revived back that have been discarded. So I feel like there's a couple different options there. And then lastly, we have, of course, some Black Knight Copium. We're running kind of we have a tech card actually in this with Cosmic Ghost Rider to potentially offset any of the Stardust that you're running into, because I've been seeing more and more Stardust, using Cosmic Ghost Rider to kind of offset that, or just use that as just a tech card in general against maybe some of this end of turn stuff we've been seeing. You also, of course, have, enablers for card generation with Valentina in case you don't have the 6-drops you need to be able to discard to get Black Knight value. You have Galactus for steps, because a fair share of these cards actually have pretty solid base power in order to enable your Galactus for steps to grow, and I wanted to have a card I can kind of play wherever opposed to going into the Giganto route, and since we're already running Infinite, which is a card that's already limited, using that as a potential option, and then like the Grandmaster into Ghost Rider to be able to, revive cards multiple times, or just to discard cards. You could use Grandmaster for that to get some more Colonel America value. Just kind of a couple different lines. I like liking Grandmaster as like an enabler to get more discards, especially for a card like Colonel America, where you're trying to discard at least one card kind of each turn. Next, moving on to my final rankings for this card, I do think the ability is fairly strong. I think being able to add that extra value, getting that extra power per, of course, discard you've had through the course of a game, being ongoing, makes it also really solid, since it can't be Shadow Kinged. Can only be offset with cards that can negate ongoing abilities. So I like that strength-wise. It, of course, is going to be more niche and narrow, which is why the flexibility is a little bit lower on this card. And I don't think this card necessarily will be adjusted. I mean, if we look at how long it takes for Captain America to be buffed in the course of this game, I wouldn't be surprised if another Captain America just continues to do its thing, and like how long it took for Sam Wilson to get nerfed and stuff. Any Captain Americas in this game, they really are very cautious about actually nerfing or buffing, which is just so interesting to think about here. But I do think this card is going to be fairly strong, which is why I do say this card is a buy. But I want to say this card is a buy if you enjoy discard. If you don't enjoy discard, this is probably not the card for you, so I would skip it in that sense. But I do think this is going to be a really nice addition to discard, and it can add just a new kind of level of maybe like scaling and play to be able to kind of like help discard out maybe a little bit. I don't know necessarily, like I said, does it go in the classic discard? Does it go in an entirely new shell? I don't know exactly where this goes just yet. Of course, I have those 3 lists to kind of mess around and kind of test and kind of theory craft, because like I say in every single video, at the end of the day, we are just theory crafting a lot of these, these decks and our thoughts on these cards, because we don't know necessarily if the meta is going to totally flip, what's going to happen. We have OTAs that happen pretty often and stuff, so like at the end of the day, this is just our insight. We haven't been able to test this on any test servers or anything, so we'll kind of see what happens there. The brand new season starts on Tuesday. We have all the Horde stuff happening too, so maybe people are going to be doing more zombie Scarlet Witch stuff, and it maybe allows you to do more discard things, so maybe be less Stardust because people are running the Hordes, or maybe it'll be more Stardust because people are running the Hordes. So like it'll be interesting to kind of just see how this week works, just like in general. But like spend your resources, guys, on the cards you guys want to play itself. Resources still in this game are very scarce. You don't get resources very, often, and like it's not in a large abundance of them unless you want to spend real money, which I don't know if you really want to spend real money. I wish they were just more applicable, and we could have a better option to be collection complete. I know snap packs definitely help, but with the influx also of cards on top of the snap packs every season, it feels like you're just kind of getting behind if you're really not opening every single week, which makes it just really tough in general. But like that at the same time, like trying to be collection complete just for cards to kind of like sit on the shelf, why not just spend your resources on cards you're going to play often, so then you're not really missing out on stuff that you're just not going to play just to be kind of collection complete, which is kind of like what I'm doing right now. But yeah, I want to say thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you guys did stick around to the very end, let me know down below, what are your guys' thoughts on Colonel America and the Series 4 cards, because I haven't done a video on the Series 4 cards. Let me know if you guys have any high hopes for them. But until the next time, it's been real. God bless, and talk around.